which perhaps would have introduced some revolutionary shift to our election practice. Now, the challenge now was that reliance on perhaps a server. I mean, INEC has come out to say, look, we didn't have any server of some sort, and there's no law that backs up that claim of an existence of a server. You know, so if you look at it, you'd find out that perhaps if there was an amendment to our Electoral Act that allowed for electronic voting, you know, and of course, existence of a server and use of same, as against what had happened. If you notice, INEC had said that they intended to use same based on the fact that they knew that the law was undergoing an amendment. So they were preparing themselves for the use of a server. But when they realized that the president did not assent to that legislation, they now fell back to the norm. You know, so that means that to them, they said there was no server. You know,
and in fact, the process of the electronic transmission of results, which would have made the server to be of great use during the poll, did not happen like in the Osun election. When it happened, even though it wasn't backed by the law, but they did experiment with it in the Osun poll. I remember very well that happened. And the question I remember we asked INEC then during our countdown to 2019 election program was, if the act got passed by the president, if INEC had the resources or the will to make it happen that on election day they would have the electronic transmission of results go side by side with the other electronic aspect, which includes the verification as well, verification process before any voter can. And they said they would be able to do that because then they will be backed by the law. So maybe something we can think ahead of the next election. That happened, but without an existing law backing the electronic transmission. I know Atahiru Jega did get into some trouble over the use of the verification process through the card reader, where a number of people had argued that this wasn't included in the law at that time, but he went ahead and used it. You think that they could have still pressed on with that argument that this had happened irrespective of the law, and then still get to score a point and say, oh, all right, you went ahead and used this even though there was no law backing, but there's evidence to show that you did transmit the result? Was it something that could have been pursued still?
There are two things. There's a distinction here. The first is that when you look at the use of the card reader and what it does, it does not take the place of a voter register. Now, but when you look at the paradigm that we wanted to introduce, perhaps if the law had been passed, which is the fact that it would enable an electronic transmission, what that would have done is that simultaneously parties would be able to know. So whatever perhaps at the polling unit or at the ward, whatever collation or results that had been collated there. Before whatever party agent has also signed there, being the exclusive results from that polling center. Same would have been transmitted to the central server. So that means simultaneously, whilst party agents have, the results of the election at their polling units, the same transmission could be seen by millions of people, so that avoids mutilation of some sort. That also gives credibility to the process. Now, but I think that if we do not amend that law to enable it, then there would always be that challenge.
Is there a political will to amend the law?
Well, I know that at the 8th Assembly, when the law was transmitted to the President for his assent, I recall the President had some reservations about some sections or some provisions of the law. So I think that perhaps when it's more settled at this time, before the next election, I want to believe that perhaps he would sign the law, and perhaps whatever issues he had must have been addressed. And I think I say this because beyond, we need to begin to think about how we can build and grow our electoral process, to sustain credibility, to sustain, to endure, or to make people to believe in the system. We have to do this very timeously so that people do not lose faith in the system or in the electoral process. The moment you begin to build up faith in the process, what you will do invariably is that you begin to bring more people out that perhaps could offer leadership. There's been so much apathy in terms of political will, the voter apathy. And one of the ways to resolve all of that is to ensure that the process of electioneering, at least you try to see that, or you try to show that you've been able to put things in place to ensure credibility, so that the votes will actually count. And I think one of the things that a lot of youths are clamoring for, and Nigerians in general, is to see that whatever before the next election, before the next cycle, we should start preparing now to ensure, that all these are put in place. Then INEC should perhaps not begin to wait until the law is passed. They should begin to do their own study. They should begin to put things in place ahead of time, so that we don't run into a situation where at the last minute we begin to have challenges in terms of logistics.
All right. In case you just joined the conversation, Ekene Maduguna is a legal practitioner, and matters arising, Atiku Abubakar and the People's Democratic Party appealing the election petition tribunal's judgment at the Supreme Court. 66 reasons why they want that to be overturned. And we're looking at the odds and looking at what sort of lessons we can learn. It's 99.3 Nigeria Info. And if you have the luxury of YouTube, you can go online and watch this live interview. If you've got any questions there, also let me know. At some point, I will open the phone lines as well as get you to join the conversation via WhatsApp also too, because I know many of you want to join and talk about this. One aspect which has remained a red herring, I'm not sure anyone would have on the side of the ruling party and President Muhammadu Buhari would have thought by a long shot this will go away over his academic qualifications. This was such a huge. I remember listening to the judgment and realized how long the judges took to explain the reason why they thought that this was a no issue in how this has been handled, and it's once again been put on the table before the Supreme Court. I know when I put out the poll on what people thought whether there will be an end to the controversy over this, and there was neither here nor there. My mind went to conversations. I think it was Oboh who said she'd just come into the country then in 1979 before the elections had happened, and it was such a big issue then as they tried to put up the constitution. Interestingly, the military was exiting with Olusegun Obasanjo, who was shepherding the electoral process. And the controversy had been on whether to produce a certificate or not. And a number of the lawmakers from the northern part of the country then thought that it didn't make such a great idea. So they worded it in this ambiguous way to make it even more confusing. How many years down the line? We're 79 till now is about, interestingly, 40 years, right? And 40 years down the line, that section remains in the Constitution, and with it has come controversy.
Yes, if you look at the notice of appeal filed by the PDP and the presidential candidate, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, you'd see that the hallmark of the notice of appeal, the hallmark of the grounds and the particulars, touch on this issue of certificates. I mean, they have tried to, in their grounds of appeal, they've raised the issue that there was no evidence that the tribunal relied on, to affirm or to assert that the president had some form of certification. Their argument had also been that if you look at, I think from CF 001,
right,
that he did not attach his certificate to that form. Well, I have a couple of reservations here and there. If you look at that form squarely, I am of the view, with great respect to perhaps the views of the parties involved in this election process. I'm of the view that if you look at if you take a combined reading at Section 31, the Electoral Act as 2010 as amended, Section 131 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999 as amended, and Section 318 of the Constitution, which is the definition section, you would see that perhaps those laws have set us where we are. First, I'm of the view that issues with respect to qualification are things that are cognizable at the Federal High Court or the State High Court. I'm of that opinion, and I say that with deference and respect, because if you look at, again, these sections I cited, you find out that there are matters on qualification post-submission of your Form CF-001. So there are issues that I think that perhaps if you have issues, the Constitution also provides that you have a 14-day window period to ventilate your grievance with respect to the forms submitted by candidates. So I think that for me, I think that issues thereunder will be cognizable at the Federal High Court, at the State High Court. But again, the main issue now, if you look at Section 131, is the way it's watered down in terms of qualifications for the office of the President. You would see that you don't even need to actually produce your secondary school leaving certificate. What it says, you have to show that you attended. I mean, I'm not supporting the the lines of the Constitution.
So you can produce a testimonial, for example, and I will say Ekene was of good standing while in secondary school.
Yes.
And
yes, because if you now go beyond Section 131 to look at Section 318, which is the definition section, it has a whole long line from subsection A down to D. Subsection D says that once if whatever you submitted is acceptable to INEC. So the framers of the Constitution had watered down the process, and I think that is a challenge for myself, yourself, to begin to engage those representing us at the various assemblies, to see with the view to amend, these provisions, at least to have a more, to have perhaps some form of increased qualification for that office, bearing in mind that even today, if you want to employ cleaners, you begin to demand for certification for for secondary school and university degrees. I think that we should also take it up with our with various assemblymen representing us, so that they can sponsor an amendment.
And it's laid out clear, and we don't have people arguing back and forth on what the Constitution said or did not say. Ekene Madoguna, we're going to take a quick break. And all of you who are listening, it's 99.3 Nigeria Info. We'll be back after this, and we'll talk some more. And don't forget, I'm going to get you into the conversation very soon. So please keep listening.
Hard Facts will be right back. Welcome back to Hard Facts.
All right, 27 minutes past 5. I am Aghogho Oboh Madoguna, still with us here on 99.3 Nigeria. Big discussion we're having. The PDP and its standard bearer, Atiku Abubakar, have approached the Supreme Court and want the judgment from the election petition tribunal overturned. In over 20 years of uninterrupted democracy in the Fourth Republic, this has never happened. But, never say never with these things, and you have to understand, which is even the bigger conversation on what sort of lessons we can learn. And heaven forbid we still have many of these areas that have been left not touched or ambiguous before the next election. And we ask ourselves, we should have known that. All right, so, Ekene, we're talking earlier on about the areas the PDP has focused on from the education qualification to the server as well as the results. And also a big conversation I was having with you earlier on before we stepped in is the numbers of litigation and what this does to the judicial system. I mean, just a couple of days, the new legal year began, and there's a lot of huge expectation on the country's judiciary. And I do know many do frown at when we look in percentages, the amount of time we dedicate to the politics and resolving electoral litigation matters. And it doesn't seem to be going down. It appears to be on the rise. After every election, people will head to the court.
Yes, I think with the exception of, I think in 2015, our then President Goodluck Jonathan did not go to the tribunal, and that was a good one. And I'll tell you why I said that's a good one. Actually, we need to begin to, one of the remote reasons why you have a surge in terms of petitioners approaching the tribunal and the courts is because there's still some form of doubt in the credibility of the electoral process. The moment we begin to put things in place, and perhaps, put up systems that would show that, the process, produced the candidates that emerged, then you would see that there will be a significant drop by candidates or parties approaching the tribunal. And that's why, honestly, the time, the money spent during the election, during the tribunal process, is something that I think we need to be looking at. When I say the time, for the presidential tribunal, you find out that the Court of Appeal sits as a court of first instance. So what that effectively means is that you have these Court of Appeal justices that also have their divisions. They leave their regular assignments to begin to face, to adjudicate on the electoral outcome. And that takes a couple of time. And of course, after that finishes up, you have a system where the Supreme Court now would have to sit an appeal against the decision of the tribunal. Again, that brings in the expense of time. And what that does is that it subordinates the normal time for adjudicatory process for other matters other than political matters.
In fact, I did hear the Chief Justice during the opening of the legal year, saying that the Nigerian Supreme Court is the busiest in the world.
Absolutely. That's very correct. Yeah. That's very correct.
But then you still have cases dragged on for several years. I know cases, some of them 1990.
Yes, that's very correct.
Mid-90s.
Yes, and as an aside, I remember during the interview of Mr. Festus Keyamo SAN, he tried to introduce some reform. That if he was appointed as a Minister of Justice, he would perhaps bring in that reform to decongest, the courts. Although he was not assigned or was not given that portfolio, but I think that his notes with respect to the reforms can be passed to his brother, Honorable Malami, the current Attorney General, perhaps to draw one or two things from it. The Supreme Court, as rightly stated by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, is actually the busiest because you have a whole lot of cases that terminate at the Supreme Court that perhaps we need to be looking at if they actually need to terminate at that point. Again, that's the challenge we face in our judicial process, and I think that with time and with the various suggestions coming up on the table, perhaps we would have some reform.
Just to get to this point about the reform, because I think it's also something that applies to several aspects of life in Nigeria. We sort of think that the judiciary, when we say is the, how is it said, is the last hope of the common man, actually means the only hope of the common man, and unfortunately puts a lot of pressure on the judiciary in the way we expect them to save us from everything. From corrupt politicians to the power holding problem to anything we think that the courts will provide us the succor we need, which sometimes people have argued is exaggerated. I mean, if the system was put in place properly, why would we have to bother about who's stolen $9 billion? Because he failed to take note of the document that he was signing on to. Now they put all the work on the courts to help redeeming. In fact, people have argued many times that the war on corruption hasn't been won until we put the big guys behind jail as some sign to show that you're fighting corruption. Whereas the big issue, many times people have argued, is with the systems that have been created to allow corruption to fester from one administration or from one office to another. But you're a lawyer, so I'm sure you love to wear the toga of the savior of the masses and the world. But you think it's been too optimistic to imagine that this trust and assurance and hope and transparency and all these virtues we expect in electoral process you talk about, that people can have confidence in, that the judiciary has the major role to play. What you're thinking?
Well, oftentimes when we talk about the judiciary, I actually want us to know that they are part of the society. They are not some, heavenly beings that are dropped down from the sky. So that means that whatever challenges that the society faces, of course, they are bound to face such challenges. Of course, if you listen to the valedictory service,
right,
the Chief Justice of Nigeria was emphatic on financial autonomy, and it does a whole lot for the judiciary. Once the judiciary is financially autonomous, then their independence the assertion of their independence can take more visibility, as it were. Yes, the judiciary is still the hope of the common man, because there's no other hope elsewhere, actually. Any hope elsewhere perhaps will be perhaps self-help, which is against the laws of the land. But I think that a couple of things would need to be done in terms of policy and administration. We have to, if you look at Lagos, for instance, you have a population of about over 20 million. And so for a population like Lagos, you would need over 120 judges if you actually want to see cases move at the speed that the society expects it to move.
Sitting every day.
Yes, sitting every day. And that's because of the urban pressure you have in Lagos. If you don't do that, what you end up getting is a situation where you'd have cases in the docket for 3, 4, 5 or more years. And actually at no fault of the judges, because some judges are all the judges are overwhelmed as we speak. In a day, some judges have 40 cases on their list, 50, and those judges are expected to put up rulings and judgments with respect to those cases they're handling. And the National Judicial Council gives them, the Constitution allows them 3 months within which to give those judgments. And the NJC strictly monitors them with respect to returns on judgment. So you can now see that when the pressure is too much on them, they are human beings also. So from the reform perspective, we need to be looking at having more judges, Then on the issue of, you talked about the issue of the system, the common man having respite on the system. I believe that things would improve. I also believe that there's nowhere else, not just for the common man, but for even the big man to go to other than the courts. So there's still hope in the judicial process. We've had excellent judgments coming out from the judiciary. And I think that there's more room for improvement.
More room for improvement. Before I get to one other part, and then I turn on the lines, there's something in the ruling, but I'm not sure if this is part of. It is part of the 66 reasons what they want to overturn the appeal, the tribunal saying that it is not their job to do the work for the prosecution, saying that electoral violence happened to an extent that you want the elections overturned. Did leave a lot of people confused, saying that, there were reports from local observers and international observers suggesting certain flaws with the electoral process. And then I also take my mind back to even the 2007 election, where you had the winner of that election, Umaru Musa Eredwa, saying that this election was so flawed that it even failed to meet regional standards. And this is the electoral process that brought me in to... And people applauded him for his, sincerity, saying that I came in through a flawed process, and then that led to the Mohammed Ways panel, which did give birth to electoral reforms in 2009. And afterwards, they say the rest is history. But the election petition tribunal then did not overturn the result in favor of Muhammadu Buhari.
Yes.
I remember very well, which I thought was a bit strange if you have someone saying, I came in through a flawed process. But this overwhelming burden on the petitioner to prove that electoral violence or electoral fraud has happened in certain places, enough if I do a regression analysis to say the election that this man won in is false. Is that being too ambitious?
Now, like again, I said, like when I started this, I said for election matters, it's sui generis. They're on a class of its own. In fact, even where a respondent admits, there's still the onerous duty on the petitioner, because part of his prayers will be a declaration that he had the highest number of votes.
Good.
And he should be declared, elected. So, based on his prayer, which is a declaratory relief, he has the onerous burden to proceed to prove his case. And that's the challenge. Again, you see that, like you have said, pockets of violence here and there.
Good.
The principle also is that you need to be able to show that those pockets of violence were substantial enough, to affect the outcome of the election. And in doing that, you have to bring credible evidence. And that's why if you have listened, the justices of the tribunal were of the fact that they were not to do the job of the lawyers. Good. Again, this is it's an uphill task, because what they expect and what the law rather expects the petitioner to do is that if you say there are areas where lawfully registered voters were denied access to vote,
Good.
then you need to collate those lawfully registered voters that were denied access to vote. They all have to come with their voters card. You have to now write or subpoena the electoral commission, to bring up the voters register. Then you now need to show to the tribunal that these are the line of voters duly registered voters that were denied access to vote. This is the voters register, and it still shows that, look, either if you look at it, they were not ticked, they were not allowed to vote. And you bring all these people, word by word, polling unit by polling unit, to the tribunal. Again, when you look
talk about mission impossible.
Yeah, because when you look at the time frame within which you have about 180 days for the tribunal to wind up. Now, if you look at that time frame, it may not be possible to get all these registered voters, to establish this ground of what you are saying. So that also brings a big challenge for the petitioner. And of course, if the petitioner does not do that, then even if he has it in his petition, even if his petition has been, put out there at the social media as very beautiful, what will eventually happen is that you find a situation where mixed feelings would arise at the end of the day. People would say, but we thought we read this on social media, So there's a distinction between the requirements under the law,
Good.
and of course the requirements under social media, which is that, look, if it's under social media, if they've shown some areas where you have pockets of violence, they just feel that, okay, look, this election should be annulled. But the question is that you must satisfy the tribunal that the non-compliance is of a substantial nature that it would affect the outcome of the election
Good.
to your disadvantage. And this didn't start now. If you go as far back as history, you look at the case of Ajasin's case. If you look at Mimiku and Oke, and the line of all these cases. If you look at even in Gigi and Obi, because you know that Peter Obi was able to upturn, if you recall,
in 2007. Yes, I remember very well.
Now you would see that he was able to establish before the tribunal that indeed there was substantial non-compliance with the Electoral Act, and which is the litmus. You need to be able to establish that fact before you can get a tribunal to upturn or to order for a rerun or for fresh elections. So it's an uphill task, and the petitioner has to be prepared. It's an onerous one.
Talking about being prepared.
Yes.
I'll save the last question, and then we can have the audience join the conversation. It's interesting. You mentioned time as one of the things we have suffered with the numbers of litigation with election over the years, and this one also too in particular, as well as resources, money. I've seen a report, I think this was done by the Nation newspaper, saying that at least someone who was asked says between 5 to 10 billion naira was expended just for the election. I mean, I saw and I thought to myself, good grief, that's so much money, and that's just on the other side. And we can deduce that the same happened for the winner of the election, and as well, which is the second respondent also too. Are you concerned about the monies being thrown into the election petition, or electoral litigation, or to even say, is it an exaggeration or a matter of fact that you have billions of naira expended during the process?
Well, personally, I've not been given any billion. And I look forward in earnest to receive billions of naira also in that light. But I think, most importantly, election litigation is quite expensive. There's so much to be done in terms of how you are able to assemble your team of lawyers, the strategy sessions, and the time. Of course, you know that law is a business, and you've got time-based billing system in place in most of the firms, and that will portend that there will definitely be a scale-up charge in terms of fees that the law firms would earn or charge the client. I'm concerned also that a lot of elected leaders in this country, I'm concerned that when they are taken to the tribunal, as it were, I'm concerned that perhaps I do not know where the source of their payments come from.
Who pays for the legal fees?
Yes. So I'm concerned because, for instance, where you have a situation where a petitioner takes a respondent to court, and the respondent is an elected representative, and he has to, get or engage his own team of lawyers. Now the question is, will payment be done from the state coffers, or will payment be done from the personal fund of the elected representative,
or pro bono?
Or I doubt. In fact, it's not one of those classes that you should ever do pro bono for. I mean, because we are all aware of the fact that the politicians in this part of the world do not offer free service. They earn. A lot of them earn a whole lot of money anyway, and the most important thing is that I doubt if you'd have pro bono services in that regard. Maybe maybe one or two, but I doubt if that's the dominant paradigm. I know definitely payments are made for those cases, but I do not know where the source of the funding comes from. Perhaps we need to look at those areas too.
Yes, definitely a conversation we'll continue to have and probe further into. We're going to open the phone lines now in case you don't have them. Let me talk to my WhatsApp crew first. I see they're already sending messages. If you don't have our WhatsApp number and you're not going to be fortunate enough to call in, it's 0809 597 5805. Again, 0809 597 5805. That's on WhatsApp. Don't call on WhatsApp, only send messages, because I cannot take calls on WhatsApp. But the ones I can take calls on regular phone lines, 012770993. That number is specially dedicated for our female callers. Then the other lines, which you can all call in, 012771993, 012772993, 012773993. Call us on any of these numbers and let's have a conversation. Who's first to the block? Hello.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
This is John from Ibeji.
All right, John. Can you speak up, please? Straining
Okay,
here.
There is something I observe in this country. Why do we hide under some pretense? During the time of election, they were called for open debate, television debate, and most of them avoided it. So, and we are talking about a result. This one did not have the result, this one have the result. I think all of us witnessed the UN program. The president presented a very good speech, But when he was asked a question, he cannot be able to answer it. So I don't know if this can point to the evidence if this man is educated or not.
All right.
To ourselves.
Thank you. And I also think a great conversation we can have, everyone who's calling in, is to also tell us in what ways you can have confidence in the system and be reassured. In my short memory, I cannot remember when we've had voter election turnout, even in Lagos, as enlightened as it looks like, higher than 25-30%. It's always been a problem. Let's talk to some more. I see Jude at Aghogho is on standby. Hello, Jude.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, this is Jude calling from Aghogho.
All right, please go ahead, Jude.
There's a question I would like to ask. Does it mean that if the judiciary is the last place for the common man, so the masses in Nigeria, they cannot do anything about, even when the judiciary is partial?
All right, Jude.
Because what is going on in Nigeria is beyond human. I don't know how to put it.
Okay.
Our judiciary system is the worst system.
All right, Jude. Thank you very much for the comment. Can a quick one on that?
Yes. Okay, Jude. I see that from what you were saying, you seem to be very displeased. But the truth of the matter is that the expectation of the society oftentimes is different from what the law really is. I've said that if you are looking at the election situation or the electionary jurisprudence, what you'd see is that the standard of test for proof is usually very high. In fact, if you bring a newspaper report or you bring a video evidence before Election Petition Tribunal, now the law is that the person that videoed that thing must be brought there while that video is being televised, so that the other party would have the opportunity
to question
it.
Okay, let's speak with let's speak with Alex. Sorry, Ken, about that. Alex is in transit. Hello, Alex.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the discussion I've been following.
Good.
I think I have the perception that the conclusion of the Supreme Court judgment is going to be in line with what we have from the tribunal. And the simple reason is what your guest has already explained, right? That it's going to be very difficult for the petitioner to prove his case. But on the flip side, I just want your guest to kind of try and enlighten us a bit more. What's really the hope for, the genuine prosecutors that have, legitimate cause, and so that it's not such that even the defendants themselves will not just go and say, because of this flaw in the system, let us commit the malpractice because no one is going to catch us at the end of the day. What's the real hope that they have in the judicial system to correct this anomaly?
All right, thank you very much.
It is right now.
All right, so what we'll do is we're taking all the calls and then Ekene can respond to them once we have them all at the end of the conversation. Austin from Surulere. Hello, Austin.
Yes,
Austin, can you turn off the device you're listening with so we don't get the feedback?
I've done that.
All right, brilliant. Please go ahead.
My concern is on the issue that the onus of proof is normally on the applicant. The person who comes to the court to allege. So, but that has made it very difficult, for somebody to be able to really skate through. In fact, it has never happened, at the federal level, maybe with the presidency. Buhari was in court for so many, times. He couldn't succeed. So all of that. So, because one major issue is the fact that the onus of proof, the electoral processes were substantially not complied with, is usually on the person who comes before the court. And here I am, as the person who is complaining. I don't have the materials. I don't have so many of the things that, INEC used. I feel that INEC should actually be the one to prove that it has substantially complied with the Electoral Act than the person who comes around. So how is it so? How can we get away from here? Because it's a very big problem. You will agree with me.
All right, Austin. Thank you very much for your contribution. Let's see who's on standby. Omolade, right? Hello.
Hello?
Good evening. Is this Omolade?
Yes, please.
All right, please go ahead.
Great. Good afternoon. Two things. First of all, because I joined much later.
Okay.
Just to find out if the person in the studio is Mr. Ekene Odum.
No, Ekene Maduguna.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Straight to my point. Good afternoon, sir, Mr. Ekene.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes. In recent times, I've seen how the judiciary, I'm a lawyer myself, how the judiciary has been sort of misrepresented. And I really think there's a lot of education that needs to be made. People, first of all, need to understand that morals is not justice, or not necessarily justice.
Yes.
That there are set rules, guidelines, procedures, and ways things are done in the courtroom when you bring a matter before the court. You are not going before a ballet or an oba. You are going before a judge, and there are set standards, things you have to show to prove your case. People need to understand that if you do not meet those standards, no matter how you think you have a solid case, you will not win in court. That is the way it is. And it has been set up that way for many years for good reasons.
Yes.
So I personally just feel sad when people come on air and start to be making allegations against the judiciary, partiality, and all sorts of things. And when they clearly don't understand the nitty-gritty of what it takes to go before a judge and plead a case or argue a case. So for me, I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done in that aspect. And I would just ask that Mr. Ekene use this opportunity to educate a lot of people out there who are just ignorant of this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I think we'll take in one more call because we're pressed for time, and then I'll let you into the rest. Magnus from Ijegun, please go ahead.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, Magnus. Please go on.
I'm calling from Ijegun to Ijegun.
Oh,
so
okay.
I just want to hear my own view. The question I want to ask, it seems our constitution is against us because big organization like INEC, it's not possible for them to tell the hook, tell Nigerians they don't have server. Okay, if they don't have server, where do they save their information? And can I secure a job in a corporate organization, even if it's a driving job and a cleaner, without tendering any certificate? At least, is it possible in this country? Is it possible? Not talk of a position, that kind of high-profile position in this country.
All right, Magnus. Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you very much. Now, I see a lot of calls. I told you at the beginning of the show that we have this as part 1. Part 2 tomorrow during Public Square. Rotimi Sankore Ayobe will delve several hours to look at this whole discussion. So many of those questions, I'm going to pass over to Rotimi and Ayobe, as well as I think Ebwade Burua, who will address many of these discussions with respect to financial independence for the judiciary, the elections, petitions, appeal at the Supreme Court. Let me go on WhatsApp quickly. Hello to everyone in the studio. I am confused. Why is it that the work all over the world does not and can never work in Nigeria? I don't get that one. Sorry about that. Good evening to you, sirs. I'm talking about the futures because this election is already over. Please, my question to your guest is there any hope or possibility that in the future a presidential election result would ever be overturned against the sitting president, Orim for Victoria Island? All right, we have just a minute and a half, Ekene, and let's see how good your summary is. All right, okay. So please shoot.
Let me take the last question first. Is there any hope that the election petition or election presidential results would ever be overturned? I think the emphasis should not be on upturning election or presidential election results. I think the emphasis should be on ensuring credibility of the process, a seamless process, an inclusive process, a process that you and I will have faith in, and there will be no need for people to now begin to go to the tribunal. And in doing that, we all owe ourselves the duty to begin to ask the members, various members that were elected to the various houses, National Assembly, to begin to begin to amend our laws, to take off some of these bottlenecks, in terms of bottlenecks in terms of electronic transmission of results, bottlenecks in terms of what actually do you mean by first school certification or minimum standard for a president to have. All of those bottlenecks should be taken up. We need to. Nigeria has grown beyond. We have grown beyond that level where you begin to water down leadership to secondary school. Even secondary school, you need to take it up beyond that. The minimum should be a first degree, if you ask me.
All right.
Yes. That then. So once we begin to do that, you find out that you would reduce a whole lot of all these issues that are topical at the tribunal.
All right, we have to leave it at that.
Yes,
We will continue the conversation on the public square tomorrow. And all of this has whet the ground on the appetite. We'll get Ekene here very soon again to talk about something that's important to all of us here. I'm Aghogho Oboh. Up next, the news and Lagosa, great drama. Don't want you to miss that one. And then don't forget Listed Legosian after Lagosa. Listed Legosian is our great show with Ireti Bakare Yusuf, and we will be looking at Banky Wellington, the Listed Legosian. Please keep listening.